So, welcome to Northern Powerhouses, our business success stories series of interviews, where we discuss with local business leaders their backgrounds, their successes, their challenges, and what's really driving them forward. So, this afternoon, I'm delighted to have with us Adam Bennett, who's director at Sticks and Glass. So, firstly, Adam, thanks for spending some time with us. And if you'd like to introduce yourself, Sticks and Glass, what you do, how you help people, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having us. I'm Adam. Sticks and Glass has been going since 2018 officially as a post-production company. We started in 2018 in the centre of Leeds. The way the business evolved was that my business partner and I are both camera operators. So I was more of a shooter, director, producer,
Yep,
editor. He was more of a camera op, DOP. And we worked together informally for sort of 20 years, flying
right.
around the world shooting little corporates or commercials or documentaries and stuff. And then we found out we were sort of working together more and more and more. And we figured, well, if we could hire an editor, then I wouldn't have to do it and we could scale up and win a little bit more work. And this was obviously pre-COVID. There was no concept of just giving someone a short-term contract or letting them work out their back bedroom, which is what I
Yes.
think you do now. If you were hiring an editor, you just expect them to work from home on their
Yep.
internet connection. So our thought process was we needed a bricks and mortar office.
Yes.
We needed a facility. So we looked around. London was not the right place to be. We wouldn't have been able to afford a shoebox, frankly.
Yes.
Manchester was completely saturated with, Dock 10 and Media City. That sort of felt like a bit of a closed shop. And then my first trip to Leeds was to sign the lease on an office in York Place, around the corner from the train station.
Brilliant.
And I've just fell in love with the city ever since, really. So we grew the business out. We were working for people like DAZN and the BBC. DAZN were based in Leeds, doing a lot of sports documentary filmmaking. And really where we're at today is we've sort of invested every year. We've invested in more space, in more
Yep.
people, in more services, in more computers, more rooms. And now we're sort of a post-production facility by day, which
Yep.
is us delivering television programs for indies in Yorkshire, so delivering to the BBC, Channel 4, UK TV, ITV, all those sort of broadcasters, and doing like the fancy stuff that people can't necessarily do in house, like the
Yep.
color grading, the online, and we've got a beautiful Dolby Atmos dubbing suite for the sound work. And
Brilliant.
then on the weekends now we do live football, so we deliver 160 matches of live football every season, which means again we've had to reinvent the business again 6 months ago and build a whole new sort of team out and a whole new set of rooms and a whole new set of services. So we're constantly in this innovating space where we're doing new things, and that you get a bit addicted to that, but it becomes very tiring as well, as you can imagine.
Absolutely. So you've got, did you say you're operating 7 days a week in effect? It sounds like.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was never the case for us before. We'd obviously have late nights, and in marketing and in commercials and in TV, you've got deadlines. So,
Yeah.
like, those deadlines need to be hit one way or another. But yeah, now we have football matches in the evening. We have football matches on Saturday. We have football matches on Sunday. So the whole facility, we've gone from what can be quite a quiet space. Most of our people don't work from home, they work in the office. We've
Yeah.
got a beautiful office, so we want people to be in. We don't want, but sometimes you can walk in and it be quiet, and then the next day you walk in and there's literally 60 freelancers, making themselves a coffee, getting a brew, going down here, having a chat. So
Amazing.
yeah, our footfall has massively changed, and that is not really how we'd have expected the business to
No.
go. But yeah, new challenges that you don't really plan for. So that's sort of changing the sort of roles we're hiring for now. Now we need more overhead people or more
Yeah.
administrative people to sort of accommodate that. So yeah, we constantly seem to be reinventing ourselves, and some of that is choice and strategy, and other times it's just it's needs and necessity.
And that's, I think that's a big part of business, isn't it? Is what's the opportunity? Is if we stay, stay the same, then we're probably not going to be we're not going to be around for very long. So 8 years in, I think it's 2018. So we're eight years in. What, looking back, what are some of the biggest challenges you've had to overcome as a business?
Um, During COVID, we were about to have our biggest year ever, and a huge amount of work got
Yes.
just decimated over one weekend of phone calls. We had to make our staff go on furlough, and cash flow is never not going to be one of the top three things that I
Yes.
answer that question with, because even if we're doing really big jobs with a great big invoice getting put in, I pay my suppliers before I get paid.
Yeah.
So every big job carries a huge amount of risk, and that's a
Yes.
cash flow risk. I'd say overall the biggest challenge is sort of just working out the rhythms and the cadence of the industry. I feel like they change. I feel like it took us a few years before we really knew that we had quiet winters and busy summers.
Right.
And then just as we figure that out and we sort of plan for the difficult winter, which was, great success, having to plan for something and those sort of things play out the way you think. And, however we sort of mitigate those risks, then those seasonalities shifting by a month or starting earlier, and then so you go back to the sort of drawing board. And I can remember people talking about sort of like the writer's strike in America, saying, "Oh, how's this going to affect you?" And go, "No, it's not going to affect us. It doesn't. We do hardly any scripted stuff. It's over the other side of the pond. It will be years before it has an impact." And then all of a sudden, you look at why are the numbers down here? And it's like, well, all of the best freelancers are out of work, and that company who does that work, who you are in a supply chain with over on this vertical part of the business, are affected. And so you suddenly realize that actually we are part of a market. Do you know what I mean? And that's a global market. And I think you can be naive to think that these things don't affect you. Like oil prices won't affect us. Well, I'd say they blooming do. I mean, we're paying a salary of a human on electricity every month, and I think 20 years ago we wouldn't be expecting to pay a national living wage to our racks room, but and that's across the board. So I think the fact that costs have become kind of so unchecked, and obviously we go, all businesses will go through a process of tightening their belts and tightening up costs stuff, but there are some fixed costs that we don't have any control of, and we can move energy supplier if we want, or we can change our HR support if we want, or we can change our our SEO supplier if we want, but really you end up worrying about pennies rather than pounds, I think, with these things. And so we are stuck in a world where the costs of doing business are incredibly high, and we're all very comfortable talking about a cost of living crisis. And I do think we have a cost of doing business challenge, which I think is a little bit less publicized. And I think that's been pervasive and got worse over the last sort of 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, seeing the increase in NI recently was hit quite a lot of people that I work with quite badly. And it obviously depends on the industry and the type of business itself. But as you say, there's so many different impacts. And I think the challenge is, it's almost more challenging when they're indirect because we don't know the reason. You can't see them coming. I've seen quite a few people recently saying projects have just slowed down recently. Now, whether that's directly related to what's happened, let's say, in the Middle East at the moment, or whether that's just totally different, but if it's directly related to it, you can make a plan because you can probably see that change coming. Whereas if it's indirect, you don't really know what it is that's causing that situation.
Yeah, also there's a feeling of helplessness with those indirect changes. So it's like we are, as small business owners, incredibly adaptable, incredibly strategic. We are thinking up the road a little bit, but you can only control probably 50% of things that have a massive impact on you. You don't control the other 50. We're in a supply chain. We are a B2B business. So if a global advertising agency's revenues are down because somewhere in the world they are selling less laundry liquid, one way or another, that will impact me in 6 months' time, even though I don't sell laundry liquid, right?
Yeah.
We are all connected. And I think the advertising industry has a cyclical nature to it. The television commissioning cycle, when projects get greenlit, have a cyclical nature to it. And now with sports, seasonality, there's a seasonality to that. So it's like trying to make a perfect jigsaw puzzle where they all overlap nicely is a challenge, which I don't think we'll ever master, but is like a constant piece of work that we're always sort of struggling with.
That makes perfect sense. And whether it's from the challenges or the successes you've had, what would you say the key learnings you have of growing a successful business? What that you can share?
I think as you grow a business, you're also growing up as a human. And like, when I started pointing cameras at things, I was a teenager, and same as Verdi, my business partner, we were in our late teens when we started pointing cameras at stuff. And then, you take on a little bit more responsibility, and then you take on a bit more responsibility on a set or on a project or on a campaign. And really you mature as your business matures. And I think it's easy to sort of get stuck thinking that your business is one thing or that you are one thing. And I think the big one of the epiphanies for me is that we have to be, well, who we are today as people may not be what the business needs in the next year. We might have to adapt again. You know, I didn't get into filmmaking to get really good at emails and really good at bookkeeping or to be good at applying for grants. That is not why I got involved in creating content and shooting stuff. And, you know, and yet I've had to condition myself. I've had to relearn a whole new set of skills around leading a team and being accountable and planning and things. These are not skills that naturally sit well with left-sided people, left-brain people, right? We are quite instinctive and we're visual, and we're not. We've had to learn skills, and I think that's the big epiphany for me. Who we were 10 years ago or 20 years ago is not who we are today, and it won't be who we are in the next 10 years as we hopefully, you know, have it see even more growth. Like, what do we need to do to change so that we can double in the next 5 years? And that will be as much of a change for me as a person as it will for the business. And I think the other big epiphany learning that we had years ago, which I say often to other small business owners, because I think some people get trapped in that transition between being like a one person or a two person band to making the step up to being a business. And I think you go, no, we are a business. I'm a limited company and I pay my VAT. It's like, yeah, but there's a whole journey that you go on the next bit. And it's like the thing that Verdi and I talk about often is that there is me, there is Verdi, and then there is the business. And those are three different interests. And sometimes what might be better for me is not better for the business. And actually what our job is to do is to prioritize the business. And that could be completely counter to what might benefit us as an individuals. And I'm not talking just financial, I'm talking everything, you know, like our lives, you know, the business has its own priorities, and putting the business above our own was something that we figured out probably a little bit late, but just in time, that, you know, that learning, I think, isn't within everybody.
No. And some people don't get that, unfortunately, and that's why they become the limit to the growth of the business.
You hit that ceiling quite quickly, because if you're always thinking about, you know, I don't know, pulling your dividends out the moment there's money in there and not investing in it because you've got needs, you know, then that you'll hit that ceiling really quickly. And we're lucky and privileged that we have been able to invest in our business, and we may not always be able to. We might have to make different, you know, tacks and jives in different directions, but certainly for us, we've certainly sacrificed a lot personally, and professionally as well, because obviously we were craftspeople in our own right with our own careers, you know, but sacrificing a lot personally, family, professionally, financially, because the business has needs that are greater than our own. I think that's something that not everybody figures out, I would say.
No, I think it's like understanding that there's different stages, isn't there? And excuse me. Different stages. Sometimes we've got to give, sometimes we can receive, and it's like it's just accepting that those things. I think the one thing I found is that crux point of, I've always said you can get to a certain size of business and success with a few good people and sheer blood and guts. Don't need lots of systems or processes or things, but once you've got to the limit of the key resources, which is the time of the key people, we can't grow any further unless we fundamentally change the mindset of this is about how we get other people to work effectively. It's not all about us. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And also, like, you know, like I sort of said earlier, we're just blokes who point cameras at things. We're not the best managers in the world. We're not the best leaders. We are not the best forecasters. We are not economists. There's a huge amount of blind spots that we have, and we surround ourselves with good people and good financial advice. We've got amazing accountants. We have amazing partners in like Creative UK and, you know, West Yorkshire Combined Authority, and loads of mentorship and stuff. But like, we're not necessarily, we don't have all the tools, and so it's really, you know, realizing that there are ceilings ahead of us and walls ahead of us that we have to overcome, and how do we do that is sort of where we're at the moment, because we certainly can't work any harder. So what's the next step? You know
it's really key. It's that starting of delegating the growth of the business to others, with us leading rather than as much as doing.
It's very difficult as well, because, you know, there's nobody else who knows more about our business than us, and so it's very difficult to let go of things. And you have to let go of a little thing before, and then get validated that didn't all burn. it was fine, and then let go of a slightly bigger thing. And I'm having a existential crisis around our bookkeeping at the moment, because after doing it for 7 or 8 years, I do it fast, but
Yeah.
sometimes I can't get round to it. So, okay, well, let's outsource that or give that to somebody else. It's like, well, I'm not entirely ready to do that, because it would take a huge overhead of me to explain all the nuance in that, and why that
Yeah.
person invoices by that and this company invoice in this way. And that's what, it would take 6 months of my time to get that individual up to speed. So that we're always at this sort of these different tipping points
Yeah.
around the business. And I think we've now got good at identifying what is the tipping point we have to tip over now to benefit us in the next 4 months, 6 months, 8 months. And I think having retained contracts enable you to make those choices in a way that just ad hoc project based, which is essentially how our business has grown up, through little projects.
Yes.
And someone texting you on a Tuesday and saying, can you be somewhere on a Thursday? Big retained contracts allow you to be more strategic, and I think that's
Yes.
there's no surprise in that, is there?
No, no, absolutely, and it also improves the value of any business. But that repeat business, that as you say, contracted, longer term contract is valuable. And Adam, I think you're aware we're a business coaching organisation, so I'm just keen to know who the best coaches you've worked with, whether that is business or sport or life in general. Who has had the biggest impact on you?
It's a sort of a trick question, really, because we've had a few different mentors from different organizations, and I feel like my realization around them is not really about the work or the wisdom that they share with you. It's more about whether you put into that process and what
Yes.
you out of that process. So we've had a few mentors that have been wonderful and really great individuals, but I imagine they couldn't explain our business to somebody else over a cup of coffee,
Yeah.
even though they'll have really worked hard to understand our business.
Absolutely.
I imagine without me in the room with them, they'd go, yeah, I don't really know what those guys do.
Yeah.
Now, that's not to say that doesn't have value. It has huge value, because it allows you to see things from a totally different perspective. And that person asking you sometimes really obvious questions about,
Yes.
why don't we do more of that? Or why shouldn't you do less of that? Do put you in a mindset where you're open to thinking about things differently. And so I sort of think it's less about the individual mentor, and it's more about your, sort of psychological approach to how
Yeah.
open-minded you'll be with mentorship. Like, I think obviously from a personal level, my father was a very instrumental person in my career. He worked in this industry, and so there's no way I would be in this industry if he hadn't decided to get into this industry, half a century ago.
Brilliant.
But I think the mentorship thing, yeah, I'm very cynical around it, but I say it from a really specific viewpoint. It's like, I know I need to go to the gym, right? I do know I need to go to the gym. And as you can see, I never go to the gym. And a personal trainer could be the best personal trainer in the world, or a very average personal trainer. But that accountability of them making me go to the gym would be the value, not
Yeah.
necessarily. So I feel like it's that commitment to work with a mentor, I think, is really good. That commitment and accountability to say, I'm going to use this person's time, and I better make sure that we are committed to make the most out of it. So I better do the reps that they ask me. I better do the physio that they say I should do when I'm not in the gym. And so I think mentorship is really valuable for sort of thinking differently about the business. And hopefully most of those learnings are around strategy and big picture stuff.
Yes.
Because I think only you know the nuance and intricacies of your business. But yeah, I think mentorship has such an important place to play, especially when you're at a pivot, or where you're at a plateau and you're thinking about the next milestone or the next rung on the ladder.
Yes.
As business owners, we don't know how to get to the next rung on the ladder. We know how to go down, and we know what the previous rung looked like and the rung before that. So
Absolutely.
telling people how to get where we are, we're not necessarily in the best place to think about things in the future, which might be around exit, about business hygiene, about governance, and those sorts of things that you're going to not necessarily is not going to come instinctively to every business owner.
Yeah, no, that all make absolute sense. I think that, being a business coach, I think the coaching approach is the one I love the most, and the principle being, we've all got enough inside us to get where we want to go. The job of the coach is to get it out of us.
Absolutely.
It's
Yeah,
not necessarily putting it in. If there's an establishment of a gap of knowledge or experience, then we can bring in that learning. But it's about, where do you want to go? That's what a great coach does, I think, is what, where do we think we want to go? But as you say, having agreed that's where we want to go, it's the accountability piece as well of,
Yeah, I
that's what you
think.
said you're going to do.
Yeah, for me, it's that accountability piece massively, and we sign up to various sort of schemes and campaigns, a lot with West Yorkshire Combined Authority, Creative UK, Innovate UK, and we really quickly realised that you only get out what you're willing to put in. So if
Yeah.
you don't have the time to actually attend the meetings and spend time with the
Yeah.
cohort and speak with the mentor, then it's not worth doing. And I
Yeah.
think we have made that mistake in the past, and I feel like we've got a much more sort of mature approach to it now, which is like, well, are these the guys to help us get to the next level? And what is that level? Because again, we've also been on cohorts where people are still at that one person band end, whereas I've got 12 employees, and also the creative sector is incredibly disparate. So I might have a lot in common with this media agency, but I might not have a huge amount in common with this textile designer.
Yeah.
And so we have a very disparate industry, which I think is probably more disparate than most.
Yeah.
Also, the definition of small, micro, medium-sized business, I think, is really loose as well. And I think
100%.
we're not all the same. We're not all paying £50,000 a year in business rates. We're not all paying £3,000 a month in electricity. We're not all doing that. So we're not all quite on the same path.
Yes.
And I think finding a mentor and a coach who kind of understands where you're at really genuinely, rather than just looking at a P&L and going, oh, well, you're at that level of turnover, therefore, how do we get you to that level? I think that provides a huge amount of value.
Yeah, no, it absolutely makes perfect sense. I think the team size is a really interesting one. And what's fascinating about that is there's a formula which I couldn't remember, but it basically says the number of relationships with a team grows exponentially fast. So something like three people in a team, there's three relationships. It's quite clear. When you get to 10 people in a team, it's something like 35 different relationships going on. So the need to build teamship and that collaboration is so key, because you can guarantee several of those relationships aren't going to be working right now. And so
yeah.
it's so you don't need that level of skill at the 3, 4, 5 level people. But so and I've seen that in the businesses I've helped, but also my own. We got up to over 100 people, and the different stages of the first 20, you knew them, you knew their families, you knew their pets' names, you knew everything. And then you get sort of 30, 40, 50, you know them, you might know the wife, but the rest of it is a little bit shady. And then I do remember, and it's to my detriment, I have to say, that we got to a point, and somebody joined and I didn't know who they were. And that's wrong, actually, in hindsight, because I think as owners and leaders, we should always at least have said hello to people that join us.
It's a challenge, isn't it? We haven't had to deal with that challenge yet. Everyone in our company we know everything about one another, and
Yes.
we're close because we have to work closely together. But I spoke with a business owner a few weeks ago when I was on a shoot in LA, and I won't say who he was, but he's a very famous business owner.
Right.
And I said, "Oh, my friend's just started working for you." And he went, "What's her name?" And I said her name, and he went, oh, and he put his hands. He goes, "So I don't know anyone anymore." And he was like, "I used to know." He said exactly what you said. He said, "I used to know everyone at Christmas. I'd stand up, I'd go around the room, and I'd say, Sean, you've been great. Barry, you've been great." And now he doesn't know who anyone is, and he's let down himself by that. He's pissed off that that's the case.
Yes.
And I can see that as well. But I think also, that's there's a whole journey you get to in that. I mean, we're at the point where we wouldn't hire anyone who we felt like wouldn't sit in that team. But as we double, there are processes and protocols in our business that simply aren't there. Would need to be there to support a team of 20 or 30. And that's what we're working on that right now as we speak. It's like, what do our team need so that they can come into a really stable and friendly and nice environment every day, even when we are double the amount of people with double the amount of clients and double the amount of deadlines. Because I think one of the things that we've been bad at is that because Verdi and I come from this very reactive, chaotic, freelance world, like I say, can you be in Berlin tomorrow by midday with a load of kit and shoot a 4-camera interview with the Prime Minister or whatever? The answer is always yes to those things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because that's who we are and that's
Yep.
who we've been for 30 years, rightly or wrongly. The business has been built in that vision as well, a little bit,
Yep.
you know, and that's fine for us as individuals. But when you suddenly realize you're burdening other people with your chaos, our challenge now is how do we level out the chaos, smooth the chaos out of the business, and just make it nice and easy for everyone. It won't be easy all the time, but like that's again one of our big challenges this year of like how do we make things a little bit more predictable as we again double in size probably.
Brilliant. Wonderful. And through all of those things we've talked about, do you have any favourite quotes or sayings about business or success or life in general that you do catch yourself using on a regular basis?
Well, there's loads of sayings that I say that I couldn't possibly repeat, but I mean, there's what doesn't kill you make you stronger is something that's always been,
Yes.
which I don't know if it's true anymore. As I'm getting older, I feel like I might be getting weaker and weaker and weaker. At a point, I thought that was true, but I still believe it in terms of life experience. And then adapt or die, I think, is so key to everything. I just think
Yes.
when we are not in an age, and we may have been a century ago, where you could open a coffee shop and you could just be a coffee shop, or you could be a greengrocer and you focused on being a greengrocer and you became, you become Jay Sainsbury's eventually. But I don't think we are in an age where that really is a possibility. I think we have to constantly adapt. But then we're also taught that we have to lean into our strengths and we have to sort of focus on our core competencies. I think for us, our core competencies are growing all the time. I think that's the challenge. Like with the internet and online, we 100% work in video and television and social media. But like I feel like we're just as much of a technology company now. Like
Yep.
our job is to provide technological
Can
solutions
imagine.
to our clients, all within the world of video, but there's so much crossover. So
Yeah.
I think we're having to be very multi-skilled. So adapt or die isn't really it's not a casual saying. I think if we look at the last few years that we've had, every year we've made quite a significant pivot or a significant change or a significant addition to the business. And most of those felt like guesses, or they felt like just random rolls of the die. So we've got a feeling that we need to do this thing. And generally speaking, touch wood, those have all sort of played out the way we wanted to. We've just launched a skills hub in our facility to help, younger people or people wanting to sideways move into training into our industry. So somebody maybe who's
Oh,
been in it
wow.
wants to learn sports editing, or somebody who's done maybe a broadcast journalism course wants to learn commentary, or somebody who maybe has directed a load of pharmaceutical conferences
Oh, wow.
wants to learn how to direct football. So some really niche things that we're delivering in our business, opening them out in a sort of a further
Brilliant.
education training capacity. Now, that is adjacent to our core business,
Yep.
but it definitely isn't our core business. It's a pivot because we do think that there's an opportunity to sort of help the people of West Yorkshire sort of reduce that pathway from leaving further education and getting into work. We feel like it's got worse for
Yes.
younger people. And I think part of that's online learning, part of
Yep.
it's lack of face-to-face, part of it's the fact that you don't get to do a paper round when you're 12 anymore. Like there's 101 different, socioeconomic reasons why it's difficult
Yep.
to get into work now. So we think building a screens hub that is particularly focused for the work and the freelancers that we want to bring into the business is a really good win-win. But again, that's just an idea. And we've put a bit of money behind it and we've made a hire against it. And hopefully we've got the stamina to see it through for it to pay off. But we when we look back at the business, we've made those sort of pivots each year, and I don't know. I think largely it's not that the pivot has to be right. It's just that you have to be thinking differently about the business. You can't just stop. And I think that's what we've kind of conditioned our brains to always be thinking. Well, how do we evolve this thing,
Brilliant.
or how settle? And there is time for consolidation as well, right? There are times where you're like, right, we've had a really big period of growth. We've been building the plane as we've been flying it. That's a new saying I say a lot, actually. Building the plane while we're flying it, because that's what we've had to do with this football. we to go from 0 football matches to 6 concurrent football matches all at the same time with
Jeez.
freelancers on the ground and freelancers back in Leeds. Like, we've really had to figure it out. So there'll be a period where we consolidate those learnings, and we don't necessarily try and reinvent the wheel for season 2, and we'll build on our learnings for season 2. But yeah, there's always reasons to sort of, I think we have to adapt. And I think it's also the gig economy. It's also young people's expectations of work and work-life balance. I just think we have to be thinking, what else can this business be a vehicle for? And I think if you can go into that with an altruistic vision rather than just a profit and loss, a turnover vision, I think good things can happen. You know, we focus on turnover, we focus on our GP margin, but like, it's kind of got to be the end of the story, not the driving factor. Do you know what I mean?
I really do. No, I mean, I think purpose-based businesses are proven to be the most successful and most profitable. That's the interesting thing. If you focus on things other than profit, guess what? They often are very profitable. But if you focused on the profit, it probably would elude us. That's a really difficult thing, because it's like that. You know, most people start businesses because they want to achieve something
Yeah, I think
profitable. But
also, Chris, people think that we are just in it for profit. Like, I think once you get, I mean, we're not a big business. We are still a small business, but you know, our team or our freelancers or peer groups think that we are in it for profit. And so you'll have conversations where they'll be like, oh no, obviously I know you're not going to want to do that because it costs more money. We had a team meeting like this week, and I was like, if you give me the choice between we deliver this job perfectly and it's a brilliant piece of work and we don't make money on it, or we deliver it just beneath that, but we earn, I'd rather deliver the, like, forget about the profit. That's not what we're here to do. And unfortunately, the television industry, we're not in it to earn money. You know what I mean? We're not in it to get rich. Again, 30 years ago, we might have done all right out of this industry, and we do okay, but it's a month by month struggle keeping to feed the beast. And so my point to the team is, like, it's not about just profit. There has to be excellence in our work. And then the
100%.
profit will sort itself out. That will come. We don't need to worry about that.
The profit will turn the profit will turn up if we focus on the purpose of the business.
Absolutely.
Couldn't agree more. It reminds me of I've interviewed the founder of the Cut and Craft brand of restaurants. They're not national, but there's one in Leeds, there's one in York. So they're a Yorkshire brand. And one thing he said to me, and it always sticks with me, and he said, Chris, people work hard for the money they spend in our restaurants. So I insist that they get the best service, the best quality of the food, independent of profitability. And in fact, and you know, he's got operational people that run the operations, but he champions the idea that people get the best. And guess what? Very, very successful brand, growing. You know,
we've all sat in restaurants where the service is terrible and you can see nobody cares, and so you can see they're all nipping out the back for a cigarette break when you're waiting for the bill. Like, we've all been in those environments, and that's one of the things that we say about our business. It's a boutique hotel. It needs to be a 5-star hotel, because if it's only a 4-star hotel, we've kind of got nothing to offer anyone. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, the service and the production and the output has to be, we have to at least be striving for excellence, even if we don't achieve it every single day of the week, because it's difficult. You know, it's difficult. But we have to achieve that, and then we can't worry about the money. The money is a completely secondary concern, because if we're able to continuously enhance our reputation and make our clients come back to us, then the money will sort itself out. And I think that's something that people do not assume. They assume that we're the man and we're trying to squeeze every last penny out. I don't know. I couldn't care less. I mean, I could. I'd like the market forces, like I said, the 50 things that we don't control, to allow us to be able to make, you know, a bag of chips at the end of a job. But the reality is, the job is more important than the invoice. You know, we have to deliver good quality work, and then everything else is secondary. And I don't think people assume that. I think people assume small business owners or medium-sized business owners are all just looking to escape on a yacht and just count the passive income. And it's like, I've not seen any passive income yet. We work incredibly hard, and our team work incredibly hard. So we have to make sure we're proud of the work that we put out first and foremost.
Yeah, brilliant. And what would you say you've learned about yourself throughout your journey so far, Adam?
That's a big question. I think my tolerance for being a people pleaser and tolerating BS has got less and less. I've spent my life just wanting people to like me and enjoy my company, and I still do. I still want people to think I'm a nice person, but I'm slightly less bothered about that than I was a few years ago. I think I have to be, as a leader, which I would not have admitted I was until very recently, but as a leader, it's important that, I step out of my comfort zone and I protect our people, and I say no to certain jobs and I say no to certain conditions. And I think so I've had to develop that skill, and be a little bit more blunt or forthright, not in a bad way, not in a mean way, but like protecting our interests, understanding how to protect our interests in a room of stakeholders. We do jobs with multiple stakeholders now, and that's, when 20 years ago, just being a camera op or an editor, your work is relatively binary. I mean, it's creative and exciting and very fulfilling, and works all 360 degrees of all of your muscles. But your stakeholders are kind of quite limited. Your political forces are quite limited. And obviously, as a business, as we're growing, the political forces sort of get louder and the work gets further away from what you're really focused on. So I've had to develop that skill. And what have I learned about myself? I don't know. I think, as I started off in this industry, it was always being a jack of all trades rather than a master craftsman. And I thought, I'm certainly not a master craftsman with anything that I do, but I know a little bit about everything, enough to be dangerous. Like, there aren't any parts of our process that I couldn't do under duress if I had to.
Right.
And I think it wouldn't be good. Like, it wouldn't be good, and it wouldn't be fast, and it wouldn't be efficient. I know a little bit about a lot of things, and I think I probably didn't understand when I was younger that being a jack of all trades was perfectly molding me into being a small business owner, really, and potentially a medium business owner and a large business owner. I think those skills have got us this far. It'll be very interesting to see what that next skill set that Verdi and I have to develop will be to get to the next stage, because it won't be being a jack of all trades. It will be something else. Those skills got us here, and now what sort of leaders do we want to be? What sort of teammates do we want to be that enable us to get to the next stage?
Yeah, there's a great book. It's well worth reading the book, but the title says a lot, which is by a guy called Marshall Goldsmith, who's renowned to be the world's top executive coach, and it just says what got us here won't get us there.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we're pretty sort of basic blokes, me and Verds. Like, we're pretty straightforward. All we care about is making each other laugh and making other people laugh. Making people like us, and that's got us this far. But I think those skills are kind of not scalable. It won't be the skills that get us to the next stage. But the point I'm making is I think we've got enough self-awareness to know that that's not what the business may need when we're double the amount of people again.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And you mentioned about passive income, but our definition in Action Coach of a true business is a commercial, profitable enterprise that works without its owners. I'm keen to know your view of that.
Yeah, we've understood for years that if the business is dependent on us, it's not a great business. And so we've been working really hard to build those retained clients, move away from operations. Moving away from operations is difficult because it's our baby and we know all of it. But at least from Verdi's point of view, not going out and with a camera on his shoulder 3 or 4 days a week. He was the main DOP on Welcome to Wrexham, and he's just had a child, so he's retired that bit of the job, so he's not generating that revenue there that he may have been. Me trying to direct less, being less indispensable to the big jobs that we win and delivering post. And, in order to do that, we have to bring good people up, and we have to bring good people through the business, and also have an idea of who are those sort of reliable freelancers as well that can take over that business for us. I think it's a journey, and I think within a sort of 18 months, I'll have a very different and hopefully a really good opinion on how we've managed to do that, because certainly from a day-to-day basis, we still feel 100% indispensable to day-to-day operations, to strategy, to every element of the business. You feel like if we have 2 or 3 days off, the whole place will have burnt to the floor. That's not true. That's our own, that's our own paranoia and you know, that's that imposter syndrome of thinking it's not legit. But we've got great people who would make sure it hadn't burnt
Yeah,
down. Like we are on that journey, and
brilliant.
we identified years ago that if we do want to exit this business, however that might look like in, you know, 3, 5, 7 years, it can't be reliant on me and
Yeah,
him going out and shooting stuff or winning business. I mean, we need to focus more on the winning the business constantly. But like, yeah, we're really tuned into that being a thing, but also having the self-awareness to know that it's not today. It's something that we have to slowly transition towards.
100%. It can't be sort of digital like one, but it is something to work towards. And I always it's our definition as an organisation. I always put can in there only in terms of if people really love what they do, or at least part of what they do, then why would why would you in the short term want to stop? But
Well, absolutely. And, you know, we don't ever want to stop getting on airplanes with loads of camera equipment and flying somewhere nice and shooting a cool story and meeting interesting people and bringing that story home.
absolutely.
Like, we love that. We probably just need to be doing slightly less emails and bookkeeping. That's
Yes.
probably the challenge.
Yeah, no, it's exactly that. It's I think it's Brian Tracy's got the produced the concept, and it's about the most successful individuals, teams, and organisations are those where most people spend most of their time doing the three things they really love and they're really good at.
Of course.
Delegate
Yeah.
everything else, and that doesn't just have to be. I mean, often when we work with people, it starts with the owners because it is more of a top down approach, but it can be bottom up too. It's like, look, let's just get you doing the stuff that you're really good at, because guess what, you're going to really love it, and vice
Yeah.
versa.
And it's a really easy thing for us to achieve in our business. Like, people come into our business knowing they want to be an editor, or knowing they want
Yes,
to be a dubbing engineer, or knowing they want to be a colorist, or knowing they want to be a camera operator. So it's really easy for us to sort of in you know champion that and be advocates for their development. I think there'll
brilliant.
be times where they have to do things they don't want to do.
Yeah,
But I think when we look around our team now, we're looking at a really good, well-rounded group of people, all with a couple of areas that they're absolute niche
brilliant.
specific in. Again, how we do that at scale is going to be a bigger challenge. But again, you know, we've brought this skills hub on, and our staff will also be the beneficiary of having an on-site training and development center. So I think we're hopeful that can continue. I think you've got also, you know, in the creative sector, we have to protect people's creativity. And I
Yeah,
think when you're burnt out, or you're tired, or you're overwhelmed, or you've got too many different things on, it's really difficult to kind of create a space where you're able to deliver good work. I don't think we always do that, but I think we're really conscious of how do we do that for our people? How do we make sure that we are giving them the tools to succeed? I'm sure that we could all think of dozens of examples where that's not happened, but
yeah,
like, you know, as I sort of said to them recently, you know, we want them to succeed. We
yeah.
want them to get more broadcast credits. We want them to do better quality work. And again, I will take better quality work at a discount if it gives them a better credit. I'll do the quality work for free if it means they get to work on better stuff that they've not done before.
Yes,
Again, initially they might think, oh no, we've got to do this other job here, but that eventually, in the fullness of time, they realize that all of these things are sort of really are geared up to their development and how they get to
yeah,
do better quality work. And like, it's the same point. If we focus on getting better quality work into the facility in this quarter than was better than the previous quarter and better the previous quarter, then the profit and the turnover will sort itself out.
absolutely. Absolutely, but I say I so believe focus on purpose, focus on what makes us different, and the rest does follow. Obviously, we've got to keep an eye on it. Absolutely, we've got to adjust to it if things are changing, but ultimately that will happen. So, final question, Adam, what would be the best advice you give an 18-year-old you if you could go back in time and do that?
No one's ever asked me that question, actually. I don't know. I think, oh wow, I don't know. The hard work is worth it. Do you know what I mean? Those long days and the long
Great.
nights, and doing, you know, I think by sort of the age of 16, I'd probably done about 40 different jobs. Do you know what I mean? Like, I was
Wow. Okay.
doing all sorts of things, heavy lifting, laboring, cleaning, you know, paper rounds, working in shops, working in retail. And I think that sort of taught me a entrepreneurial spirit, at least,
Yep.
not to be an entrepreneur necessarily, but understanding the raw commercial
Yes.
transactions that are out there in the world, that labor can result in, money in your pocket. I think, I think all of those, yeah, it's just saying, keep saying yes to all those different opportunities.
Yes.
You might not want to carry furniture for Croydon Council up and down 6 flights of stairs. That might not be your dream, but you'll probably learn something about it, and
Yeah.
you'll learn something about yourself. And out of all those opportunities, or out of all those things that I did when I was younger, somehow I learned hard work, and I think the hard work is transferable. And I
Yeah.
think that's the thing that we are losing as a society right now. And when we're hiring people, we're much more likely to hire the person who's been an Asda driver for 6 months or been carrying furniture for the council than the person who's just left film school who wants to be the next Wes Anderson. I'd much rather see that you've been working for Amazon delivering packages for 3 months because you want to work. Like, I think that the willingness to work is something that's so important. I think so.
Yes.
Yeah, if I was saying that to myself as 18 or to an 18-year-old now, it would be go and work, and it
Yeah. Yeah.
doesn't matter what industry you're in, because it teaches you a little bit. I remember thinking about the sweet shop that I used to work in, thinking, well, there's that little sweet shop concession stand at the train station, and I could probably hire that from the council or British Rail, and I know where the supplier, I know where they get their crisps from, I know where they get their newspapers from. I could just phone it. And I remember having those thoughts at 17 years old. Do you know what I mean? And I think I wouldn't have had those thoughts if I was just sat at home applying for jobs on
No,
do you know what I mean? I wouldn't have done.
absolutely. No,
Yeah, I'll probably say keep going, keep plugging away. It will be worth it in the end. But I'm yet to prove that it will be worth it in the end. We're still plugging away as that
well,
10-year old.
that's probably put you set. I don't think that's true, to be perfectly honest. But just because you haven't got to a point in the future where you might define your, endpoint doesn't mean you're not clearly
No,
very, very
the journey's
successful
good
at what you
fun,
do.
right? The journey's great fun, and I think
Yeah,
we're lucky to work in a sector that we love. And like I
yeah,
said at the middle of our chat, it's like we don't get into this business to be rich. You get into it to make stuff, and we're really lucky that we get to make stuff. And it's a good journey, and we still get to go on airplanes and shoot things, and we get to meet strangers
brilliant.
and have good fun and have a laugh. Like, I mean, I think we wouldn't be doing this if we weren't having fun and we weren't trying to make each other
Absolutely.
laugh the whole time. That's the other thing actually that I would say to my 18-year-old self or my 28-year-old self would be, do a business with a friend, because you hold yourself accountable and you work harder for one another.
Yeah,
And we've been really lucky that we're on the same wavelength as one another. And I don't think
brilliant.
everyone finds that. And I know from partnerships that I've seen flourish and then fail, that they always
Yes,
end up having a disagreement about one thing or another. But I think have going into partnership with one of my best friends is easily the best thing either of us have ever done, and we
brilliant.
wouldn't have done it otherwise. We'd have just carried on being
Yeah,
freelancers, probably earning good money and getting to make nice stuff. But I think going into business with a pal was a massive thing for us, and that's what I'd advise my 18-year-old to do: find that pal.
great. What a great piece of advice to finish on. I think that's absolutely wonderful. And I work with quite a few partnerships that like that, starting businesses in back bedrooms and all sorts. And yeah, they tend to stand the test of time, I should say. Adam, it's been fascinating to talk to you. And I can honestly keep talking all afternoon, but I want to thank you for your time today. And for anyone that's watching that would like to get in touch with you or Sticks and Glass, what would be the best way of doing that?
Yeah, I'm Adam at sticksandglass.com. And we pride ourselves in trying to reply to every email we ever get, which again, that's getting more and more difficult as we
Yep.
grow, but we're still doing our best.
Brilliant. Well, look, it'd be great to swing by another 6 to 12 months and just see what those new decisions you've made and actions you've taken. But for now, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
Thank you.